A Christmas Carol is an 1843 novella stroke short story by the British author Charles Dickens. Dickens was born in Portsmouth in 1812. When he was still a child, his father was sent to a debtors' prison and he was forced to work in a factory. He wrote his first published story in 1833. Shortly afterwards, the Pickwick Papers made him nationally famous. By 1843, he had 6 major works under his belt. Unfortunately, his latest novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, didn't perform as well as he'd hoped. Then his wife became pregnant with their 5th child. He needed another success. We tend to forget that Christmas, as it's celebrated now, is a fairly recent invention. Before the 19th century, it was a meal, a few gifts, and church. When Queen Victoria came to the throne in 1837, it was still a fairly unremarkable holy day. Britain had been Protestant for about 300 years, and it had made historic enemies of the 2 major Roman Catholic powers on the continent. Christ's Mass still struck some Puritans in particular as suspect, as being as much about the Virgin Mary as about Jesus. When the last of the laws discriminating against Roman Catholics in Britain was repealed in 1829, the scene was set for a major re-evaluation. Arguably, A Christmas Carol became the single biggest contributor to that process. Washington Irving and Douglas Jerrold had both written Christmas stories before Dickens, but Dickens was keen to hitch Christmas to social reform. He'd recently seen children at work in Cornish tin mines. He'd read the second report of the Children's Employment Commission, and he'd given a speech in Manchester urging educational reform. He was determined that A Christmas Carol should help broadcast his concerns. Everyone knows the story. An old miser called Ebenezer Scrooge, who owns a counting house, has an employee called Bob Cratchit. Cratchit wants time off for Christmas Day, but Scrooge isn't keen. Nowadays, we can overlook how conventionally acceptable that might have been in 1843. Bob has a disabled son nicknamed Tiny Tim, who isn't expected to live long, and to whose fate Scrooge seems indifferent. That evening, Scrooge is supernaturally visited by his former business partner, Jacob Marley, who shows him the chains he's earned in the afterlife for also being miserly. Marley tells Scrooge that before dawn he'll be visited by 3 ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future in an effort to show him the error of his ways. The ghost of Christmas past shows him what he used to be, young and receptive to life. The ghost of Christmas present shows him the harmful effect he's having on those around him. Christmas future shows him how inevitable it is, given his current trajectory, that he'll end up in afterlife chains, like Marley. And since he's an old man, that could be any day now. Scrooge wakes up on Christmas morning, realizing there isn't a moment to lose. He sends a big turkey to the Cratchit household, makes a significant donation to charity, gives Bob a considerable pay rise, and resolves to become Tiny Tim's benefactor. The end. In many ways, A Christmas Carol has become the Christmas story, the foundation of the modern version of the festival, pushing the Nativity firmly into second place. It triumphed chiefly by making way for consumerism. Dickens invites us to identify with Scrooge, just as all authors invite us to identify with their protagonists. And the transformation Scrooge undergoes is from parsimony to don't count the cost generosity. Obviously, most of us are never going to be as morally bad as he was. But imagine you're a single parent on a tight budget. You're not sure if you're going to make it through Christmas without going into the red. Then your daughter, 5 years old, asks Santa for something horrendously expensive. Prudence tells you to say no, but are you being a Scrooge? Because, and these are the other morals of the story, Christmas is about children, and time only goes in one direction. Who knows, but tomorrow you may regret being so hard-hearted. You may not come this way again. By contrast, the Jesus story is really a mystical meditation on the incarnation. Believers or not, most people haven't got time for mysticism at Christmas. They're too busy shopping. Anyway, that's A Christmas Carol. A good read, but be careful with that credit card.